Today we're going to study one of the most foundational chapters of the ex-vegan study, which is health symptoms and conditions. And we're going to see in dynamics what conditions and symptoms people were able to heal by going vegan, and then what symptoms and conditions they were developing towards the end stage of veganism that brought them to quitting veganism. And if you watched the previous chapters, you would know what was the main reason for quitting veganism, and you can probably deduce it now if you haven't watched. We also are going to see what happened after people quit veganism. I think this is going to be a very, very, very interesting and intriguing video. So let's begin. I'm going to share the screen. Let's first recap what we've already filmed, what we already discussed, was demographic data, diet history, nutrition quality assessment, perceived diet quality assessment, diet and lifestyle relationship, experience of quitting veganism, nutritional supplements and deficiencies, and all of those videos can be found in the playlist on the ex-vegan study. So please watch it. You can watch the videos in order and then they will make a lot of sense. For example, the previous video that we filmed was nutritional supplements and deficiencies. And in some way, it may be quite interesting in the context of the current video on health symptoms and conditions, because I guess watch that video, you will see the percent of people, the participants of our study, who did not take B12, for example, as a vegan. Then you will also see the rate of diagnosed vitamin D deficiencies, iron deficiencies, and other things. So, in the context of having those deficiencies, the health symptoms and conditions that we're about to see will appear very bizarre, and actually tried putting together some analytics on how certain things could be correlated with the findings from the previous video, just based on the general predictions, general knowledge of association of certain symptoms and conditions with certain deficiencies. So let's begin. I want to show you first what the participants were presented with when they were filling out the survey. That was foundation of this basically study. And they had conditions listed. Then they also had custom fields that they could fill out, because I could not possibly include everything that people could have possibly experienced. So I gave them an opportunity to fill custom fields as well. But here you see before veganism, early veganism, midterm, end stage, and ex-veganism phases. And the conditions here were the following. For example, you did not have any condition like excessive hair loss before veganism. You leave it blank. Then, if you developed excessive hair loss early in veganism, then you put check mark. Then, as midterm vegan, for example, you managed to reverse it. You don't put check mark, and then you developed it again, put check mark, then you did have it as next vegan, then you don't put the check mark. Then let's say you had excessive hair loss before veganism, then you went vegan, and your hair loss became much less. So the condition improved. So you don't put check mark anymore. Whenever this condition resumes, you put check mark again. Then, for example, let's say you had dandruff before veganism. You put check mark. Then, when you went vegan, your dandruff became much less. It's still there, but it's much less. So you don't put the check mark as well. We count as like not having a condition when you go either in full remission or if you observe very significant improvement in the condition. So these were the rules for how to fill out this table. Now, how the data will look. The plots that you will see in this study will appear as family of curves like this, corresponding to the individualized stage of veganism. Again, I will remind you, we had 24 participants, and among those participants, we had people who were one person who was on a vegan diet for 9 months and deteriorated, and people who were on a vegan diet for 15 years and also experienced some health outcomes. So we could not possibly make the generalized, normal, like year by year timeline or month by month. It would be impossible to process that data. This is why I came up with this individualized timeline before veganism, early veganism, midterm, end stage, and next veganism, such that everyone, irrespective of how long they were in a vegan diet, could, in a universal fashion, fill out this data. Because again, resilience of every person to malnutrition, and veganism is malnutrition, by just if you're familiar with biochemistry of human body, everyone has different degree of resilience to long-term malnutrition. This is why end-stage veganism will happen at different phases for every human being. And then on the y-axis, we will have percent of participants who reported having the condition or symptom that will be in the title or in the legend of the plot at each stage. So this is how we'll go. Number for percent of participants who reported having certain condition or worsening of certain condition at each stage of veganism. So this is the structure, what we'll be working with. Plus, there will be also some plots that will be comparing certain statistics with, let's say, deficiencies from the previous video. And now, before we begin looking through the data, I would like to invite you to make your guesses. I prepared 5 questions. And before we start, I would like you to think and bring up your hypothesis for each of them. So the first question that I would like you to answer in the comments is, what was the most frequent end-stage veganism symptom or condition, in your opinion? So what affected the most people in the study? Then the second question, what condition symptoms were healed by going vegan? So make guesses what things were reversed or significantly improved by veganism. Then number 3, was B12 supplementation related to health outcomes? Again, if you haven't watched the previous video, please watch it to learn the percent of participants who were not supplementing with B12. And here, I will be actually looking at the relationship between B12 supplementation status and health outcomes. So I would like you to make a guess. You can give some more extended answer to this question, because if you want to discuss the mechanisms that explain your answer, then you're totally welcome to do so. Then number 4, what percent of people with diagnosed iron deficiency at the end stage of veganism had heart palpitations? So I would like you to bring the range of percentages for how many people with iron deficiency would have heart palpitations. You can give range like tens of percent, like 60 to 70, 70 to 80, whatever makes sense to you. Then question number 5 is, what percent of people still experienced flatulence at the end stage of veganism? Because there is a notion among vegan MDs, vegan influencers, that with time, you no longer experience gas when you eat a lot of roughage, when you eat a lot of complex carbs, resistant starches. So this notion exists that your microbiome will adapt, your gut will adapt, and you will no longer have gas. So I want you to think what percent of people still experience flatulence at the end stage of veganism. And also bear in mind that we had ultra long-term vegans as well who participate in the study. So make your guesses. And you can respond to these questions like 1 and list your answers. If you have multiple, if you want to make several guesses, and just go row by row. And then here you can pause the video to leave your answer. And then you can probably think if you want some refreshments and how you could get comfortable, because the video is going to be rather long today. Long and actually intense. So please pause the video, think about these questions if you want, and we're going to begin looking through the data. The first group of symptoms that we're going to see is dental symptoms. Here, how to also work with those graphs, I will be naming you the data scale here. So here we have 60% maximum. This plot scale is 60%. So the maximum data range here. And in the legend, for this graph, we have enamel erosion, dental caries, cavities, and tooth decay. So 4 dental symptoms / conditions. And the highest line here, the highest peak here is green line. In the end stage of veganism, we see it is cavities. So 50% of respondents suffered from cavities. The surge happened in the end stage of veganism. Although, yeah, it started like being very high in midterm veganism. So people started developing cavities all of a sudden as midterm and end stage vegans. Half of all the respondents. Then, dental caries started affecting also 42% of people. Dental caries actually is the precedes development of cavities in most cases. Then another thing that we see is that suddenly enamel erosion goes from 0 before veganism to 30%. So 30% of respondents by the end stage of veganism already had enamel erosion. And then story with tooth decay went also a little bit on the rise here. We see that people already had tooth decay prior to going vegan. And then it's the smoothest progressing curve here. So tooth decay already existed and then peaked at the end stage of veganism. And then every curve here drops off. Of course, you cannot reverse cavity, for example. You cannot fully reverse the damage from tooth decay. Dental caries is an infection. It can be cured. Enamel can be restored. It's called incipient caries, where you just have demineralization of the enamel. It leaves surface defects, but you can remineralize the enamel from within. And from outside as well, if you use like topical fluoride, if you use non-hydroxyapatite, maybe combination of the two because they have different chemical action, they have different depth of penetration, different type of crystalline structure that they form in the teeth. Fluoride actually forms very almost indestructible structures in the teeth. But dental caries, nevertheless, even if you arrest it, even if you heal it, and you form a very, very strong repaired enamel, it will be cosmetically unaesthetical. It will be dark, it will leave a dark spot. Or if you had enamel erosion, then it also will forever remain this bright white stain on the enamel. It no longer will be glossy. It will be looking matte. Even though, again, on the inside, the structure is fully healed, fully restored, and is even superior in strength. It will etch away basically at much lower pH than the normal baseline enamel when you restore it. So yes, a lot of those things, they're not fully reversible. But what this drop off means is that people no longer experience the development of new damage of the enamel. And I have the interview with Char. She described really impressive adventures with dental health she had due to veganism and complete reversal of the situation pretty much after she quit. So this is something that happens. We see significant improvement in dental health in all respondents almost. And then when we start looking at the diet, which will be our next video, we're going to see the dietary changes in people, what happened when they switched from veganism, because we saw already qualitative assessment of changes in dietary preferences in people. As ex-vegans, people eat much more curated, much more specialized diets than prior to going vegan. So if we summarize these plots, we can tell that dental issues are among the most prevalent conditions associated with veganism reported by the participants. This is something that I know for sure because I've looked through all of them, but this is some new statement for you. This is, with 50%, not the most prevalent, but surely among the most prevalent things. Then the incidence of caries and cavities nearly tripled by the end of veganism. And then quitting veganism was a measure that allowed to prevent further enamel damage in participants. If we are to speculate about this, of course, gradual reduction in stores of calcium, the gradual reduction in the amount of available calcium in the body, this will do the trick, of course. Plus, also another thing that damages enamel greatly. Actually, here I have second plot related to dental symptoms. We're going to discuss it in a second. When you are on a vegan diet, there are several factors that are quite damaging for the teeth. First thing is dietary habits. Veganism instructs people to eat a lot of carbohydrates, eat frequently, and also it nurtures snacking culture. Veganism is all about snacks, freezer snacks, handy snacks to bring to work, snacks, because again, it's very rapidly metabolized food. It's just sugar spike food, sugar spike diet, pretty much, veganism. And you no longer have, for example, if you were eating a balanced diet, well, balanced. I'm not talking about food pyramid. I'm not talking about any particular school. I'm just talking about the diet in which you eat a meal and you have a sustained energy. You don't think about food for many hours because you ate plethora of protein, complete protein. You ate plethora of fat. You ate plethora of micronutrients. Your body is busy digesting that. It's very happy with this slow release energy. It received all micronutrients, all necessary macros to work very well in a very calm, sustained fashion, that you don't have sugar spikes all the time, that you don't need to snack all the time. Another thing is that when you gradually become more and more malnourished as you're exhausting the stores of fat soluble vitamins, minerals, your body will become desperate for food. And if you watch the interviews from the Ex Vegan Interviews playlist on my channel, you will notice that almost all respondents started being obsessed with food by the end stage of veganism, snacking, and like eating everything that's not like glued to the surfaces. In some cases, being very bizarre cravings. Then another thing is that when you eat a lot, when you eat all the time, you don't allow your oral cavity any rest. You are not remineralizing the enamel. Almost all food that you eat or food residue becomes acidic. Food residue becomes acidic. Bacterial metabolites are acidic. Saliva may contain sugar if you are on high sugar diet. So saliva itself becomes acidic. It may contain sugars. All of those things, they create very unfavorable environment for the teeth to remineralize. Plus also, again, the saliva must be hypersaturated with minerals to be able to deposit them on the teeth. The teeth become slightly edged away after each meal, and then the saliva, which is super saturated with minerals, comes in contact, and those minerals precipitate. They have surfaces where they can precipitate. This is what happens on a healthy diet. This is what happens when you are in mineral surplus. Unfortunately, this is not happening on a vegan diet, and the longer you progress, the more you rely on your skeleton to just provide you essential calcium for just your nervous activity and heartbeat. Your teeth already become least priority. So these are some factors there. And you do everything to flush out minerals out of your body on a vegan diet, unfortunately. And then also, again, the food itself is acidic, it's sticky. You eat all the time, you don't provide minerals. Then other contributing factors could be, besides calcium, it could be also vitamin D deficiency, which was for a long time was considered one of the main predictors of caries, enamel weakness in general. Vitamin K2 as well might be somehow related to that, but there's no solid science proving that. They're only hypotheses and some experimental evidence, but it's not proven. So these are the things that contribute here. So this data is absolutely not surprising. No matter what hygiene you're following, you're not going to have any salvation, because the main thing that ensures your oral health is what you eat and the composition of your saliva and your bacterial balance. When you feed bacteria that produce caries, I'm sorry, uh, you're not going to avoid, no matter what topical solutions you use, pretty much. Plus also when your enamel becomes weakened, because teeth, they're alive on the inside, they have immunity as well. They have receptors for vitamins, for fat soluble vitamins as well. So you're ridding them of internal defenses and you are etching them from the outside. Then dental symptoms too. Here we have tartar buildup, tooth sensitivity, and enamel stains. We see that 42% of people develop tooth sensitivity in the end stage of veganism, with 33% of people already having it heightened at midterm veganism. And then we see the drop off here. The initial rate was 12%. So it tripled, more than tripled by the end stage of veganism from before veganism. The rate of tooth sensitivity, which is again weakening of the enamel. Lack of minerals, lack of fat soluble vitamins, poor environment in the oral cavity. Then we see tartar buildup is on the rise here. Tartar buildup, it's a gradually developing thing. You cannot just develop it suddenly, especially if your dietary habits don't change. So this is likely that people started having some other problems with their teeth and went to the doctor and got diagnosed with tartar buildup as well. So this would be my hypothesis how it was discovered, but I would say that this curve should be very smooth here. Then enamel stains is something that we see nobody experienced prior to going vegan, and now 3 people, which makes 12%, are happy owners of enamel stains. Enamel stains is something that doesn't fade on its own as well. It needs to be either corrected by the veneers or you just live with them. So we have 12% of people experiencing enamel stains towards end stage veganism. Enamel stains can be from erosion, they can be from incipient caries, all sorts of wear and tear due to demineralization of the enamel. And here we see the drop off of all of those. Okay, tartar you can remove at the dentist, then tooth sensitivity can be reversed because this is the beginning stage of enamel damage. And then enamel stains, as I mentioned, you can only stop developing them. You cannot remove them conservatively. You cannot polish them off. You only can literally just put veneers on top. So this can only mean that people stop developing the new ones. So to summarize, the rate of enamel damage leading to tooth sensitivity spiked, tripled, towards the end of in its end stage of veganism in participants. The progression of enamel damage stopped or got considerably less after quitting veganism. And with tartar buildup also, we see that there is some drop off in the rate of tartar buildup. So people, again, changing their diet, and you will see what people did. It's quite curious, and I'm actually very relatable to me too. We see that it helped to prevent tartar buildup in people. Then we're moving on to gum and jawbone disease. So here is a busy plot, but we will be analyzing the general trends because these things are all related. So periodontal disease, gum inflammation, gum recession, bleeding gums, loose teeth, jaw pain, and jawbone recession. Here a few comments here. So periodontal disease has stages. Bleeding gums, of course, can be consequence of weakening of the gums, like with vitamin C deficiency, for example, but also could be a consequence of inflammation. Then gum inflammation itself, gum recession can be a consequence of either losing the jawbone. When the bone shrinks, it pulls the gum, or it can be the consequence of losing collagen. So the gum, like in the elderly, it like recedes because of loss of the bone and loss of the gum tissue itself. So gum recession can be that. Then also gum recession can happen due to chronic inflammation in the gums in some instances. Then loose teeth are one of the symptoms of periodontal disease when chronic inflammation leads to tooth mobility because tooth is held inside of the bone. It's held by the ligaments. There are some micro tissues that hold tooth in place. And also the gum itself should tightly hug the tooth. When there's inflammation, there's like increased porosity, and those things, they cause teeth to become loose. Jaw pain possibly is a separate issue. It can be associated with periodontal disease when it's progressed significantly, but otherwise it may not be related to that. So let's look at the data. The scale here is 50%. The peak is gum inflammation. Gum inflammation peaks at the end stage of veganism and was observed in 42% of the respondents. And the starting point before veganism, it was at 8%. And then we see the drop off. As in all plots we saw, people change their diet from veganism, from high carbohydrate based diet pretty much. They observe the relief of gum inflammation. Of course, we can like speculate, we can gaslight people that they're lying, we can assume, but it's just this drop off does happen. People no longer have that. People who participate in the study, you can write down that you confirm that you no longer experience this after quitting veganism. Then the next highest peak is gum recession. Gum recession was induced by veganism in 33% of people in the end stage, with a starting point of 4%. So one person had gum recessions before veganism, and then we see some little increase here in early veganism, midterm veganism, then boom, peak. And then people no longer experience the new development of gum recession, for the most part. Some of them still do. Gum recession is not reversible for the most part. You can stop its progression. You can change your ways. You can change your diet. You can create conditions for retention of the gum tissue. and stop damaging it if you had some mechanical damage. But this is unlikely that here people were brushing teeth in a certain way, and then here they're brushing them like with some, I don't know, super turbo power with, I don't know, some shoe brush for for suede shoes, you know? It's very highly unlikely. So this is likely a nutrition induced thing. Then the next peak is bleeding gums. We see that bleeding gums actually were common before going vegan. They become very uncommon after quitting veganism, but here the curve increases slightly. So we see that the rate of bleeding gums increased from 17% to 30%. So it went by 50%, no, but maybe a little bit more than 50%. So bleeding gums were the next leading thing in the end stage of veganism that dropped off. So most people no longer experience bleeding gums. Then the next was jawbone recession was observed in 20% of the participants in the end stage of veganism. Then the next one is loose teeth, happened from 0 to peak here of 17%. People experience that. Then the next one is jaw pain, periodontal disease, like full blown periodontal disease. But periodontal disease here, you see it fluctuates. So it was not 0, it was 4, then increased to 8, then 4, then 8. So actually, in the midterm veganism, there was some relief here. And then it got completely reversed after people quit veganism and changed their diet, presumably from what they were doing before veganism. So let's summarize this plot. Over 40% of participants developed gum inflammation by the end stage of veganism. Over 30% of participants developed gum recessions. The progression of gum and jaw bone issues stopped in most participants after they quit veganism. How about this? And gum disease, yeah, it's also a consequence of you eat carbohydrates. Imagine you have the boundary between of the gum line, right? You eat sticky foods, you eat all the starches. Where do they end up? They adhere, they coat the teeth. One thing is when you're raw vegan, when you eat a lot of greens, juicy greens. But even raw vegans, me included, really love sticky things like dates. You don't just eat salads all day long. You eat sticky stuff, fruits, starches, especially, are very bad for gums. Bone and spine aches is the next one. We're moving on from teeth, jaw to bone and spine. So here, there is one type of data points, achy bones, that's not quite related to the rest of the day of the curves, because achy bones are likely to be consequence of B12 choline deficiency. I would say maybe osteoporosis. This is a separate symptom, but then I put different segments of the spine. Pain in different segments of the spine. So here we have neck pain, shoulder pain, mid back pain, rib cage, and lower back pain. Lower back pain being very important thing because it's the segment of the spine that bears the most weight of all spine. So if anything, it will be hit first because again, it's bending. You know, lower back is bending. It attaches to the pelvis. It participates a lot in the movement and propulsion of the body. When we walk, we use our lower back. It creates amortization of the spine, of this whole mass of the body that sits on it. This is why lower back is a very important marker. That's why it may start showing symptoms, aches first. And then when we talk about all of those pains and all of those segments of the spine can respond to microdestructions. And you can have wear and tear on the discs, on the joints, on the joint tissue, on the cartilage. You can have wear and tear on the bones. Things may start collapsing. If you have some microligaments that start being damaged, that lose their elasticity and strength, when you lose musculature, when it becomes weaker, you might develop some um, shifts, some unfavorable shifts, then grinding of things on each other. I personally developed simultaneously with very strong pain in my heels. Simultaneously with that, probably after 2 years on veganism, I developed also pain in my mid back. Like it goes like through from the front in the rib cage here to the back. I can sense it in both areas, sometimes also in the shoulder. So all this complex still could not reverse it. So because again, it's something collapsed on something, maybe caused wear and tear. And because of this collapsing, there's nerve pinch or whatever it is that nutrition cannot reverse on its own. So it requires physical therapy at this point. Even though, yeah, some things got reversed, but if you have some mechanical shift of something, it may cause like semi permanent damage as well. That will require you to, like, I don't know, wear some retainers, some, I don't know, like posture retainers, maybe performance of certain very targeted exercises, physical therapy, and different like life habits. So this is something that I experienced myself. Lower back pain was also a huge thing for me. It was very, very annoying towards the end stage of veganism for me, midterm and end stage. So let's study these curves here. The peak here is convoluted. We see that lower back pain, neck pain, then achy bones, and so there are three curves here. Yeah, they all peak at 30%. So 30% of participants, about a third, reported neck and lower back pain towards the end stage of veganism. Again, neck also bears weight of the head. It's another sensitive thing here. And is very prone to nerve pinch, very prone to muscle tension, and so on. Achy bones, again, as I mentioned, they are likely to be a symptom of deficiency in B12 choline, primarily. Maybe methionine, maybe lysine. So those things can happen as well. Or again, calcium-related osteoporosis as well. Why not? Then, shoulder pain we see is the next highest. 20% of people develop shoulder pain by the end stage of veganism. Then we see rib cage pain and mid back pain was observed in 17% of people in the end stage of veganism. And then we see the reversal here. The reversal happened in most people. Lower back pain, nobody has it anymore. Shoulder pain, nobody has it anymore. Then neck pain, achy bones still are found in 8% of people, and rib cage pain. I would still report rib cage pain probably. It would mid back or rib cage. I don't know what to choose here because again, it's radiating pain. But then also mid back pain was reversed in most people. So we see that a third of participants experienced achy bones at the end stage of veganism. Then neck, rib cage pain, and bone aches did not reverse for 10% of participants after quitting veganism. This said, I really hope, guys, that you will restore, that you will find your ways to come out of this annoyance. And now let's look at the very specific conditions, not just symptoms. So here I put bone and joint degradation and conditions: osteopenia, osteomalacia, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and hyperparathyroidism. Hyperparathyroidism, please, if you're vegan, please go to the doctor and request parathyroid hormone test. Please, it will save you so much time. It will save you so much health. Just do that test. Parathyroid hormone. Write it down and do it. Irrespective of how you feel about this video, how you feel about ex-vegan, anti-vegan, carnivore, vegan, whatever movements. Just do this test for your own sake. Parathyroid hormone. I put it here. Again, no one is, if you can see here, no zero. Nobody had hyperparathyroidism. If I was to take the survey, I would respond that I had hyperparathyroid hormone increased. I mean, parathyroid hormone increased, or I had hyperparathyroidism. I had super sky high parathyroid hormone levels by the end stage of veganism, meaning that I was severely depleted of calcium, even though I ate a ton of stuff that you will find all of those pop health websites that talk about magnificent plant sources of calcium, such as almonds and leafy greens. They don't contain anything in the free, unbound, bioavailable form. So this is a complete fallacy. I don't know how it made it to those websites. So, however, we see that two participants here, we see that 5% is just one single person data. Two participants were diagnosed with osteoarthritis, osteopenia, and osteoporosis at the end stage of veganism. And the participant with osteoporosis and osteopenia observed a significant improvement from introducing animal products to their diet. So we see here they reported the reversal. They reported they went into remission for those conditions. The person with osteoarthritis still has it. Osteoarthritis is a degenerative disease. You can only freeze it, pretty much. You can freeze it, you can stop its progression. Restoration of the joint, I don't think that it's likely. But this data is kind of fascinating, even though, again, it's one person's stats. And another note here, you see that I have both symptoms and conditions. Not every symptom is being brought up to the doctor. Not every symptom becomes taken into account as a part of a disease. That's why it's important to list both symptoms and diseases, because disease is a system of symptoms. To diagnose disease, the doctor needs to conduct certain blood work, needs to collect all of the possible symptoms, whatever diagnosis is needed. Symptom is a separate thing, but nevertheless very important. Because it's important to note, for example, that person, for example, had headaches and then didn't have headaches and then had headaches again and see what happens. What, for example, dietary changes led to this outcome. Or hair loss. Person didn't have hair loss and then developed hair loss and then stopped it. We also need to see why. This is why I delineated them, symptoms and conditions, and I kept both because they're both quite valuable. So now that we looked into the dental health, gum and jaw disease, then bone and joint degradation, I wanted to see the association between dental and bone diseases and vitamin D deficiency status. So this is our intermission here based on the previous video. So we're combining the two. About a third of all participants were diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency. So what I'm seeing here in this plot, I plotted before veganism as early vegan, then midterm vegan, and end stage veganism here. So we'll see 4 plots. And I wanted to see whether people had certain typical symptoms or conditions and how they related to the vitamin D deficiency status, diagnosed vitamin D deficiency. So here I have cavities, tooth decay, lower back pain. I also added frequent colds and flu that we'll see later in this video. So we see that before veganism, lower back pain was observed in all participants who reported vitamin D deficiency prior to going vegan. And we see that people had, whoever had no vitamin D deficiency and had cavities, tooth decay, and frequent colds and flu, there was no correlation. So people did not have diagnosis of vitamin D deficiency, and they had frequent colds and flu, tooth decay, and cavities. Then in the early vegan stage, we see that frequent colds and flu started getting into some correlation with vitamin D deficiency, possibly. We see that there is a split. 75% of people did not have diagnosed vitamin D deficiency and suffered from frequent colds and flu among those who had this condition. And then 25% of people who had frequent colds and flu had vitamin D deficiency. And we see that lower back pain again kept being correlated with vitamin D deficiency. And here, by the way, the number of respondents who had lower back pain, let's look. Lower back pain rate increased here. So before veganism, and in the early stages of veganism, diagnosed vitamin D deficiency was strongly associated with lower back pain. And in the early vegan phase, 25% of people who developed frequent colds and flu were also diagnosed with a vitamin D deficiency. So there could be potentially a link, but dental issues were not related. Then, as we move on through veganism, midterm veganism, and end stage veganism, we see that in the midterm veganism here, diagnosed vitamin D deficiency was only weakly associated with new dental cavity development and frequent colds and flu. And in the end stage of veganism, we see that lower back pain rate was no longer strongly associated with vitamin D deficiency here. So we see that people who had lower back pain, among those who reported, first of all, there was a surge of people who reported lower back pain, and a lot of them were not diagnosed with vitamin D deficiency. But at the same time, more vitamin D deficient respondents reported frequent colds and flu and tooth decay. After quitting veganism, this data is not included here, none of the respondents experienced any of these symptoms. Yet 4 participants still reported having diagnosed vitamin D deficiency. So the hypothesis that these things could be caused by vitamin D deficiency is quite weak. We see that this crisis that we see in the end stage of veganism is unlikely to be related to the vitamin D deficiency unless, again, people did not get proper diagnosis of this deficiency. Because again, as we discussed in the previous video, there are considerations for what we consider diagnosed vitamin D deficiency, what goes into it. There's a huge funnel of people, huge funnel of data. We might not know that people had certain deficiencies. But this flip indicates that lower back pain was likely associated with other deficiencies because there's no like gradual transition. There's a surge of this condition, surge of vitamin D deficiency, but they're not linearly related. If we talk about lower back pain, I chose lower back pain because it was the most prevalent here among all like spine, possibly spine destruction conditions or like orthopedic things. This is why I picked it out of all of them, just for making this plot more cleaner, more concise. Dental issues, yeah, dental issues and lower back pain, and in general, all those like spinal damage might have been associated with calcium deficiency, or it could be associated with. We can probably split it into two and like analyze lower back pain and dental issues separately, and speculate that lower back pain could be associated with just bone damage because of methylation problems with a spike of homocysteine that nobody gets tested for ever. Then we're moving on to cognitive and memory disorders. This is the next huge block. In here, we see the horrendous 80%. So the scale of this plot is 80%. Let's look at the legend. Here we have in this plot short-term memory loss, long-term memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and difficulty learning. And later, this is the advertisement of the future plots that we'll see, perhaps in this section or in the end of this whole chapter. We'll later see if there was a correlation with B12 supplementation, because these are usually quite related to B12 deficiency. They can be. B12 deficiency causes very strong and rapid brain damage. It's really, really bad. So let's look at this plot. Difficulty concentrating is the tallest curve here, tallest peak. And we see that in the end stage of veganism, 70% of people develop difficulty concentrating. This progression was somewhat gradual, right? So we see that by midterm veganism, 50% of respondents already suffered from difficulty concentrating, didn't take measure here. And then we see that short-term memory loss was the second leading thing that rapidly progressed through veganism as well and reached what will be 66% of people by the end stage of veganism. This is a very scary thing. So this, when it happens, like let's say by the midterm veganism, if this happens, this means that you need to abort the mission of veganism urgently because neurological damage is super hard to restore. It's super hard to heal. It can end up being irreversible. Brain damage can be partially irreversible due to veganism, due to malnutrition. It can be, of course, due to multiple reasons. It can be omega-3 deficiency. It can be, energy deficiency. Brain in general is very self-protected organ. Brain has a lot of adaptations to go on like autonomous mode with bare minimum. But eventually, it becomes bad. When this situation becomes symptomatic, this is a catastrophe. Like the moment you felt it, like let's say you spent a week to confirm that you have it, a week or 2 weeks to confirm your awareness of the symptom, that it does exist, that it doesn't go away. And you run to the grocery store if you're vegan and having any of these, you run to the grocery store and buy yourself at least a carton of eggs and start binging on them. Binging, I'm not like in ED sense, but just eating them as much as you can, like at least the yolks. Then, difficulty learning here was observed in 56% of respondents in the end stage of veganism. And long-term memory loss, which is super scary thing, was observed in 20% of respondents in the end stage of veganism. We have some baseline here. It doesn't come from zero. So yes, some appreciable amount of people had difficulty concentrating prior to veganism. And they still do after quitting veganism. Maybe not these exact people, but some people have residual effect here. Unfortunately, this graph doesn't differentiate individual people whether they had an improvement or they had worsening. Probably there could be maybe way to plot it this way. This only accounts for the number of people. And since these stages are not like people different people in these stages currently. This is in the retrospect for each individual person, so it would be interesting to see the number of people who experienced improvement and then worsening. So probably this would be a favorable strategy for plotting these plots. Maybe there is a way to do this easily and without like creating many graphs. It would be quite interesting. But unfortunately, yeah, this is only a compound number of people. We cannot say that these people, for example, had this. I would need to zoom in on the specific participants to derive these conclusions. But we see that, yeah, there is a residual effect. So difficulty concentrating stayed in 17% of people. We see that after quitting veganism, difficulty learning persists in 10% or 8% of people, so 2 people. Long-term memory loss persists in 1 person. This is very sad. And again, it shows you the seriousness of this problem that veganism does or may lead to neurological damage of any kind. And you need to be very vigilant to not miss the moment when you can take control over it and restore it. And if you think that this graph is super scary and impressive, we're going to move on. But first, we'll summarize it. Cognitive issues were the most prevalent category of symptoms and conditions among the participants in the end stage of veganism, with 70% of participants reporting such issues. Quitting veganism resolved these symptoms for most of the participants, but sadly not for all of them. So I wish you all recovery and finding ways to bring back the optimal functioning of your brain. And here I would like to invite you to watch the interview with Ellie, who talked about her multiple sclerosis and veganism. And the interview states it very clearly from the very first seconds of it, what she experienced and how she feels about it. Then cognitive and memory disorders too. Here the scale is 50%. And here I zoomed in on certain other symptoms. We have difficulty speaking, difficulty formulating phrases, difficulty analyzing information, and poor coordination. Anyone who had B12 deficiency knows what I'm talking about here, and here as well. It will be anemia and B12 deficiency primarily. So here we have the peak. Difficulty analyzing information occurred in 45% of people. Difficulty formulating phrases occurred in the same amount of people. Then, it's all in end-stage veganism. Then, over 30% of people had difficulty speaking. And it's super crazy too when it feels like you don't own the speech. It's really crazy. The next one, poor coordination, meaning how you navigate, how you feel your body in space, whether you're clumsy or not. We see that 30% of people suffer from poor coordination in the end stage of veganism. Again, some of these curves, such as difficulty formulating phrases, difficulty analyzing information, they don't start from zero. They're 1 person who suffered from that before going vegan. We see that going vegan actually helped a person with difficulty formulating phrases to reverse it in the early veganism. But for the most part, these curves, they zero out here. And again, what we see after quitting veganism doesn't drop to zero. So not everyone was able to recover after quitting veganism as well. So almost a half of participants experienced speech difficulties towards the end stage of veganism. A third of participants experienced difficulties with body coordination. These symptoms got reversed for most participants, but not all, after quitting veganism. So again, at any sign that this is happening, please save your brain. Save the most important organ of your body. The next one, depression. 80% here, the scale. But again, the plot here goes, the highest is 5%. Here I have depression, SH tendencies, and hopelessness. This is the trinity. We see that depression was common for 30% of participants here. Was quite common among the participants, what I meant to say. 30% of people had depression before going vegan. And then we see that the rate doubles by the end stage of veganism. And then we see that it drops off significantly. So whatever people do as ex-vegans allowed them to get into remission for depression, which is quite an intense condition. Getting out of depression takes a lot of effort sometimes. It takes a lot of considerations about the lifestyle. It takes a lot of biochemistry adjustments. It takes sometimes a lot of willpower, sometimes assistance from therapy. Sometimes it requires sometimes some like external energy push, basically. Because depression on its own, it incapacitates a person sometimes. There's like when people don't see the value of doing anything in life. I mean, it's very difficult to heal because there's zero motivation to do anything, and it's fully biochemical at that point. It's a perpetual cycle of not being able to do and then not doing and not having energy to do. Then hopelessness here, we see that this symptom was common, like in 8% of people before veganism, and then it goes to 42% of people. Then SH tendencies actually reduced. This was the thing that if you wrote in the comments what was healed by going vegan, SH tendencies went down. So before veganism, it was the highest, and then completely got to zero. We see that there was some slight bump here, but again, it's very few people had that. With this depression plot, some further symptoms will be related to that as well. So the rate of depression doubled among the participants by the end stage of veganism. In the early stages of veganism, the rate of some depression-associated symptoms decreased. Quitting veganism resolved depression and associated symptoms in most participants, even compared to the pre-vegan stage. Given that a lot of the participants of our study were teenagers prior to going vegan, this kind of makes sense because teenage years are very hard. And especially people who go vegan, they're more sensitive usually, especially who go vegan as teenagers. These are usually very sensitive, very aware people who want to do good, who want to do better. And with that in mind, with this mindset prerequisite, those people might be more susceptible to depression. This is just speculations. I didn't look into the data. I didn't compare the age and this condition. But still, this thing may be, again, partially contributed by the fact that people reimagine, start understanding life slightly differently, making different choices, perhaps more self-forward. But again, speculation. If you participate in the study, please check in the comments if you had depressive disorders and say what you have to say about it. Then the next plot is depression 2. There are some other symptoms, so personal hygiene neglect, self-neglect, and loss of interest for life. And we see that people, by the end stage of veganism, 42% of people developed loss of interest for life. Close to half of participants in the end stage of veganism that got reversed for most people after they quit. Only one person still suffers from that. Which, if you need help, maybe like seek camaraderie in the comments. Then we see that self-neglect appeared in some people. Personal hygiene neglect appeared in some people by the end stage of veganism. How about that? So self-neglect symptoms emerged in 12% of participants towards the end stage of veganism. Quitting veganism was associated with no longer having those mental symptoms in most people. And loss of interest for life again. Imagine that. Because of how screwed up the biochemistry was. Because of malnutrition. This is literally mental destruction. This is destruction of self. So bring things that it needs to destroy self. This is what it is. This is how we can reward it. Let's move on. Digestive issues now. Let's look at this graph. Peak here is 70%, so the scale here, 70%. Chronic diarrhea, chronic constipation, bloating, stomach distension, IBS, IBD. Okay, the elephant in the room is bloating. 60% of participants reported bloating. And interestingly, again, contrary to the vegan MDs, vegan influencers, who preach this absolutely bogus microbiome theory that eventually it will adapt and no longer have bloating, who don't understand what bloating originates from or refuse to see the logic in this, in the mechanism of bloating and gas. They claim that with time you get adjusted and no longer experience it. But we see it steeply rises by the midterm veganism. How come? And stays by the end stage veganism and reverses only after people quit vegan diet almost entirely in our set of specimens in the study. When you hear all of those influencers saying that your microbiome will adapt, it takes 2 months to recover your microbiome after even if you wipe it out with antibiotics. Fully. Repopulating your microbiome, let's say you have all cultures needed, and then you start feeding preferentially one culture, like some strains of bacteria, not the others. It will take 2 to 4 months maximum. And in general, these bacteria, they eat fiber and produce certain fatty acids, certain like gases, certain nutrients, and of course, gases, as their metabolites. The more food you give to those bacteria, the more bacteria you will produce, the more metabolites they will produce, among which there will be gas. And the more bacteria there are, the more they eat, the more gas they produce. No matter how far you are in veganism, this natural mechanism will not change. In addition to that, you can be genetically unable to process resistant starches. Your gut wall may be not susceptible to the metabolites that are produced when bacteria breaks down resistant starches. You may have bloating and irritation in response to that, as opposed to those magical super effects that are promised by vegan MDs. So all of those superfoods may only give you digestive discomfort because it's your genetics that you are born with, and you will never be reborn into anything else. There are at least two things that do that. Add to it your natural genetic sensitivity to lectins. Some people will be more sensitive to them, some people will be less sensitive to them. Some people will be sensitive to one group of lectins, some people will be sensitive to other group of lectins. If you're interested, I'm sensitive to lectins in goji berries, mulberries, dry mulberries, and quinoa and tomatoes. Not so much to gluten, for example, but to some other kinds. Who could have guessed? But experimentally, I observed that. So this is like, this goes so against all of the like vegan health influencers and MDs, what they're talking about. It will forever stay just because it's natural to be this way. People who swear by enemas on vegan diet, how it reverses, how it cleanses their gut, making them more capable of they're not digesting fiber, somehow magically processing fiber. They literally, by doing enemas and colonics, they flush out the excess of bacteria. And they gradually repopulate it again. And they think that, time to do another enema. It worked so well last time. Yes, because there are less creatures that can process all of this roughage. That's it. So 60% it peaked. Again, I'm surprised that it was not like flat curve. Maybe there was some dietary changes as we saw in the first video. We saw that people actually went through some diets on the way. I don't remember if I reported the chronological order. But yeah, people actually were trying different things. So 30% had it in the early veganism, and then it increased. Another, by the way, reason for that would be that people try different diets. They try to eat more whole foods. Whole food vegan diet will crank up the fiber content. Then another thing, they try eating more because their health starts deteriorating, so they need to eat more. Maybe they introduce some superfoods, some green fart powders, and other things, some fart protein powders, whatnot. So this can happen too. Now let's move on with these curves. Next is stomach distension. And now let's remember all of the ED vegan influencers who preach that you need to stretch your stomach. Now let's remember all of the magazines that say that you need to increase the volume of food you eat. Now let's remember all vegan MDs who say that you need to eat a lot, who praise this behavior that you need to stretch your stomach and eat as much food as you can to get all the nutrition, because this is what veganism is about. They play on this thing, on this natural mechanism that humans are naturally are wired. We are naturally wired to eat everything. So we have very poor controls when it comes to food because it is an evolutionary adaptation. We need to be ready for the times of scarcity that are not uncommon in natural environments. So our brain sees everything that we can eat and it eats everything. So they play on this evolutionary bug that we have that does not kind of correlate with our present time resources accessibility. And they convince people that, you see, it's so natural to eat everything you just possibly can stomach. Eat as much as you can, stretch your stomach, adapt yourself to high volumes of food. It's so unnatural because it doesn't allow you to digest food properly. It doesn't allow the stomach acid to sanitize everything properly. And then it also causes wear and tear as well on the stomach wall, on the gut wall. It's just not normal. So we see that before veganism, there was one person who had stomach distension thing, but then it goes to 25%. The early veganism stays like that through midterm veganism, and then goes to almost 40% in the end stage of veganism. So we see that eating practices involving stomach distension were common in 25 to 40% of participants. Then the next curve here is IBS and chronic constipation affected 30% of people by the end stage of veganism. And then we see chronic diarrhea also start affecting people in the midterm veganism, and then in the end stage veganism, 25% maximum. And then we see IBD. Sadly, yes, the person who quit veganism, there was one person who developed inflammatory bowel disease. So this is sad. Please figure it out. Whatever you are doing. I don't know if it's consequence of being vegan or if it's your new dietary choices, but I hope that you find the solution for that. Bloating we see subsided completely. IBS is non-existent in the ex-vegans. Stomach distension is non-existent in the ex-vegans. The only thing that stayed is what's this curve? Dark blue, so chronic diarrhea is still observed in one person. So, how about this? Let's move on. Digestive issues too. We see heartburn and reflux, bad breath, gas, blood and stool. The scale here is 80%. So we see that up to 70% of people developed gas, flatulence while being vegan. And then it's on the rise towards the end stage of veganism. With bloating and gas, actually bloating is probably compounded by gas and just feeling of being extended and having overpressure on the inside. Gas is like you can relieve it. Bloating is not always it's not always that you can relieve bloating per se. Gas you can. And then we see family of curves here under 20%. So we see heartburn and reflux was observed in 20% of people in the end stage of veganism. I actually have an interview. One person that I interviewed who had crazy experience with dietitian with their child. She also talked about her experience with heartburn and reflux and how it got reversed by switching from high carbohydrate diet to more balanced approach to diet. She's still on pretty omnivore diet, but she just substituted the volumes of carbohydrate foods with nutrient-dense, protein-rich, fat-rich foods. This was the only difference, and she reversed the condition with heartburn and reflux that started bringing her some serious damage to the esophagus. She was able to reverse it without medication, even though doctors were trying to put her on some drugs, some serious medication. Just by changing the diet from vegan diet to normal diet. Then, bad breath, we see the rate increased here slightly. And then blood and stool was observed in one person. They developed it as early vegan, and then this trend stayed. Very sad. So up to 70% of the participants developed flatulence while being vegan. By the end stage of veganism, 20% of people developed heartburn and reflux. Here, interview, yeah, please watch the interview. There will be Marie Antoinette on the thumbnail in the interview playlist. Let's move on. Eating and image disorders. And here's another one where people could have guessed what was reversed or alleviated by veganism. So we see here, should I read it or is it not so favorable for YouTube? I don't know. So BNAN, then BINGE, and dysmorphophobia. The first one is BULIMIA. So we see here is that 17% of people came to veganism with Enem. And then it went down as people kept being vegan. Okay. Actually, it would be interesting. I didn't plot it for this one, but I would be curious if this switched to binge. Because we see here that some people, 12% of people, came to veganism with binge, and then it got contained in early vegan stage, but then, boom, we see the surge. Over 20% of people had binge by the end stage of veganism. And then dysmorphophobia was a little bit there, it's smoother curve here. We see that everyone went in remission after quitting veganism for all of these. BULIM, also went from up to down to up in the end stage of veganism. So why is that ex-veganism, going ex-vegan, can put people in remission for these things? I had some interviews discussing that, but there are two reasons for why people, for example, can binge. People can binge because of some psychiatric problems, psychological/psychiatric. It can be that. Or they can be binging because they're never full. It's just their body panic trying to get nutrition that the body needs, essential nutrition that the body is lacking from the diet. And again, in the interviews, there's this recurring theme that I could eat the whole jar of peanut butter in one sitting. I would eat everything and I would never be full. I would eat like whole bowl of potatoes and I would never be full. I always wanted something and I didn't know what. So it was like this panic in the end stage of veganism in a lot of participants and a lot of the interviewees that reported that they were never full and they did not know what to do. So it's body's panic and body forces people to binge because the body is hungry. And then when you go ex-vegan, when you provide the body high density nutrition, you eat smaller volumes, you eat in more regulated fashion, your appetite is very regulated and sustained. You have very sustained energy release. You become much more peaceful with food. If it's not some psychiatric psychological pattern. If it's only biochemical, then it is very nicely sustained here. Of course, if it was of different origin, you would need to go through therapy, possibly through some correction, some behavioral correction, in order to get rid of those behaviors with food. But when it's biochemical, it reverses like this by providing the body exactly what it needs in the amount that it needs. And again, given that a lot of people went on animal-based diets, dropping their fear of animal fat in particular, that's one of the themes that you will see. Because of this, we see the remission here. This is my hypothesis. So the summary, the surge of binge eating occurred by the end stage of veganism. 17% of participants had a history of ANA that was taken under control by going vegan and stayed in remission after quitting. All participants with a history of EDs went in remission after quitting veganism. Then enemas and purging practices are also related to this. So we have here use of practices and purging practices, whatever they could be. So use of enemas, we see that here that about 10% on average of participants engaged in cleansing practices in the end stage of veganism. We see that one person performed a cleanse in the beginning of veganism. So this was not too common for people. But still, we see 3 people were using enemas. Again, this is something that When vegans look at the sequence of events, and again, vegans love to bring it up that there are those like not cases that people start doing all the crazy things. But imagine everything falls apart in the body because of malnutrition. You want to figure it out. You want to stay vegan. It's your identity. You invested many years into that. You thought that it was the healthiest thing. Listen to any vegan MD, it's the healthiest thing. But everything's falling apart. But it's the healthiest thing. So you get convinced, you find alternative medicine doctors who start talking to you that it is your body that's imperfect. Your body is too dirty. It's meat that you ate 20 years ago that gives you those symptoms. You need to do enemas. You need to colonics. And this is what people do, among other things. This is the way to try to hack it because the body is imperfect. You're paying for the choices that you made before going vegan. This is exactly that. Marcus Rothkrantz, I remember, and Kara Brotman, they absolutely love enemas. And raw vegan community in general, everybody's somehow enemophilic. I don't know, it's crazy. But they cleanse. They cleanse. I don't think that it's cleansing anything. I mean, it can be like some shock therapy in some cases, but it's used specifically to increase the nutrient absorption and to, I don't know, pursue some healing. So, but not many people did. So 3 people here. Then, excessive weight loss and gain. Excessive weight loss is in blue, excessive weight gain is in red. If you recall the video experience of quitting veganism, you'll see these stats as well, but excessive weight loss and gain, the scale here is 40%. So close to 40% of people reported like this excessive weight gain in the end stage of veganism. Over 30% of people, over a third of all participants experienced excessive weight gain in the end stage of veganism. And only 17% of people experienced excessive weight loss. We see this thing fluctuated here. So as early vegans, there were a couple of people who experienced excessive weight loss. Then midterm vegans experienced less so, then in the end stage it peaked. And then weight stabilized after quitting veganism. So again, contrary to the common belief, people experienced excessive weight gain by the end of veganism. Why? They were malnourished, so everything was falling apart. Again, I'm recapping everything that we've seen so far. Everything was falling apart, but people were gaining weight, which means that there was a huge dysfunction in the energy balance, malnourishment. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. This diet is metabolically unhealthy. And for a variety of reasons. If you want, you will watch my entire playlist on vegan deficiencies to be able to see the logic, the complete picture. Like, buckle yourself to the chair when you watch it and power through. Because you need to understand how it works as a system. Not just like single nutrient, single effect. No, it works as a system. One deficiency leads to another deficiency, leads to destruction of some system. Destruction of some system leads to another deficiency, combined with lack of supply of the nutrient. It all goes in spiral, going up and up and up and up, or down and down and down and down, depending on what we take as a direction. And eventually it leads to this avalanche effect. And then, as I say, in the end stage of veganism, there's a cliff when everything falls apart simultaneously, very rapidly, and the decline is super rapid, and this is when people quit veganism because it just becomes too scary. Then, female health disorders. So this data is only for female participants. We had 87% females and 13% male participating in our study. So at different stages, the scale is 60%. So for females, males didn't report any male health disorders. So we only are going to look into female population, and we have infertility, period pain, irregular cycle, loss of period, endometriosis, and polycystic ovarian syndrome. No one reported endometriosis. I'm very happy for that. Then, of course, the dominant curve here is period pain. We see that there was slight increase in the rate of period pain when people went vegan, again, contrary to the common belief. So 50% of women experienced period pain, up to the end stage of veganism. And then there is a drop off here, down to 15% only, from 50 to 15. And then we see that there is a surge of regular cycle towards end stage of veganism, 25% of participants, female participants specifically. Then polycystic ovarian syndrome was on the rise towards end stage veganism. Infertility, there were miscarriages actually reported. Then in the midterm veganism, we see loss of period was reported by 17% of participants. And we see everything got reversed here in the ex-veganism. So whatever, again, dietary interventions people did led to complete reversal. So following a vegan diet did not aid in resolving the underlying cause of period pain in female participants who experienced it before vegan, for the most part. Again, I don't know who reversed, who didn't, it's just the overall number. But the rate stayed 50%. 17% of female participants experienced loss of periods during veganism. Purple line here. The rate of incidence of irregular cycle increased towards the end stage of veganism. Female health is quite responsive to diet because, again, our hormones, they're super sensitive. We have dynamic hormonal system that is related to stress hormones, to nutrients. We also have the periods. I have a very good video on periods and how vegan MDs and influencers, especially cleansing doctors, they talk about the loss of periods as something good. I'm debunking that through various mechanisms that can explain the loss of periods and the conditions of malnutrition coming from both hormones and other nutrient deficiencies that just don't allow to form an endometrium in the womb. And this can cause an irregular cycle because of various reasons. Some participants experienced infertility and polycystic ovarian syndrome towards the end stage of veganism. Let's move on. Female health disorders too. We have other things here. Scale is 20%, so it's less so. But we have estrogen dominance, too strong bleeding, too scarce bleeding, loss of ovulation, miscarriages. We see that 20% of women, 17% of all females, lost ovulation in the end stage of veganism. Then, miscarriages occurred in one participant, midterm and end stage vegan. How about that? Then, estrogen dominance was on the rise, surprisingly, because people are saying that phytoestrogens will take care of excessive estrogen. You know, all this milk with estrogen will cause women to have estrogen dominance and whatnot. No. First of all, eating carbohydrates only will cause estrogen dominance, likely, or may. And then phytoestrogens don't seem to do anything, and phytoestrogens are super high on a vegan diet. They're supposed to passivate the receptors of estrogen, not allowing estrogen to be delivered to the target organs. Too strong bleeding, we see that increased from 10 to 17% by the midterm veganism and then dropped off. Too scarce bleeding occurred in 15% of respondents here by the end stage of veganism. And loss of ovulation here as well. So one female participant experienced repeated miscarriages in the middle and end stage of veganism. I have an interview with her. Up to 20% of female participants experienced other menstruation disorders towards the middle and end stage veganism. If you are a man watching this, or male, living with a female who menstruates, and you eat the same diet, observe her health. Because female body is much more finely tuned, much more sensitive. Because female reproductive system is much more responsive to the violations in normal nutrition. So you can watch your female and guide your decisions in terms of diet and lifestyle. Okay, with consideration of your own individual, each of your individual food sensitivities and such, but the general trends. Because female health will respond. Be kind of on top of your female's sexual health. because that can tell you a lot. Plus, also, it will create much better bond. It's a very important, actually, tracking mechanism of both emotional health, psychological health, and of course, the biochemistry of the body. This is the message that I tell to all males that I'm friends with, how important it is to be connected. I usually encourage women to track their cycle, to be aware of their cycle, because again, it's a very strong tool for connecting with your entire body. But then I also encourage my male friends to be attentive to their female health, female health and cycle, because again, it tells a lot. Then we're going to see the third part on female health disorders. I had some females who no longer menstruate, so they suffer from such things as hot flashes, cold sweats, and pelvic floor laxity. I should have used past tense for them because we see that those things they got reversed after quitting veganism. But there was a surge of pelvic floor laxity in two participants who no longer menstruate in the midterm and end stage veganism. And then hot flashes were on the rise too. I mean, from one person, the second person also started experiencing them in the end stage of veganism. One person still experienced them afterwards, but for one person it reversed. So, two female participants who no longer menstruate reported worsening of the menopause-associated condition symptoms towards the end stage of veganism. Again, very small pool of data, but very happy that those women were able to find a way to feel better. Or one woman here. Pelvic floor laxity, by the way, very unpleasant thing. And veganism, with all it does with the muscles, with ligaments, with tendons, not a joke. And with hormonal health, of course, as well. Pelvic floor laxity, I'm very happy that you reversed it. Then we're moving on to thyroid gland disorders, kind of like hormonal theme here. So we have hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. Percent participants, 20% scale here. So we see that hyperthyroidism was on the rise. There was one person before vegan and early vegan, and then it increased to 4 people having hypothyroidism by the end stage of veganism. It wasn't reversed for everyone. And then hyperthyroidism was found in one person after quitting veganism. So the rate of hyperthyroidism among participants increased from 5% before and early in veganism to 17% in the end stage of veganism. 50% of respondents who reported newly developed hypothyroidism as the end-stage vegans reported reversal of this condition after quitting veganism. One participant was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism after quitting veganism. Hypothyroidism is quite common too. I guess a lot of people would, if they tested, they might have found that they have it. Because again, there are deficiencies that can very well cause it. Again, there might be, because these things, they need to be diagnosed, there could be the artifact of not being diagnosed prior to that. Because when in the end stage of veganism, people might go to the doctor because they're like, something is wrong. Please help to determine what it is. So this may be the artifact of that. Could as well be part of the regular checkup where it was found. So it's hard to speculate here. We can only speculate. We cannot tell for sure. Now, insulin resistance and diabetes. So diabetes 1, 2, metabolic syndrome, and insulin resistance. Diabetes and the metabolic syndrome were not found in anyone. Very good. But we see that 17% of people developed insulin resistance in the end stage of veganism. Specifically, here, like 4 people, boom. And then for most people, it got reversed for 3 people. One person still has it after quitting veganism. Very metabolically healthy diet, isn't it? Then immunity status related phenomena. This is a huge one. So immunity can be affected on vegan diet because of protein deficiency, just basic like amino acid deficiencies. Then in general, immunity is what? It's associated with protein synthesis. So we need amino acids, we need enzymes to retain the reactions, we need to sustain homeostasis of the reaction of protein synthesis by having minerals and vitamins to provide certain charge, acidity in the environment, and keep the enzymes active. And with all of that, there are plenty of factors that can cause immunity disturbances. Plus, also we have local immunity and general immunity. Local immunity can be as well affected by the weakening of the mucous membranes because of vitamin A exhaustion, depletion. Because vitamin A stores in the fat tissue and the liver tissue for pretty appreciable amount of time. So body can pull from the reserves, but then again, there is a cliff when the stores are no longer there. And people who are not capable, genetically not fit to convert beta carotene into active form of vitamin A, or people who do not eat vitamin A with animal fats or beta carotene with animal fat, they will not be able to convert beta carotene that well into the active form of vitamin A. There's a significant amount of people who are not capable of doing that. So mucous membranes of the entire body, so everything that interfaces with the outer world, will be less defended, less protected, because local immunity will be decreasing. And then again, general immunity is closely tied to the protein synthesis. And protein synthesis, just Google it, just research what is needed for protein synthesis. For the reaction of, you need, first of all, you need instructions. So you need the DNA, RNA, you need enzymes, you need oxygen for energy, you need ATP, you need good. So anemia is an antithesis of good immunity, pretty much. Then you need a bunch of minerals and you need vitamin C, you need iron for the environment of the reaction. And amino acids is building blocks. You need a ton of stuff to synthesize proteins. And when your body is no longer capable of pulling from the reserves on malnourishing diet, it's just impossible. So let's look at it. Immunity status related phenomena, 50% scale here, 50% of participants. So frequent colds and flu, yeast and candida, and susceptibility to infections and UTI. Frequent colds and flu started cranked up to 40% on average by between midterm and end stage veganism. Then it grew from 8% previously. So it increased by 5 times the rate of incidence. Then yeast and candida increased by 50% here, the rate, from 20 to 30%. Then susceptibility to infections increased from 4% to 20%, so 5 times increase. And UTIs were slowly on the rise from 0 to 12% in the end stage of veganism. Frequent colds and flu completely reversed. UTIs almost reversed. One person still has them. Yeast and candida is lower after quitting veganism than it was before veganism. So again, some dietary changes helped people to put it under control. Susceptibility to infections dropped 1% only. So before going vegan, it was 1%, then it jumped to 20%, and then it's 1% again. 20% meaning it will be fifth, will be 5 people here. Look at this. 40% here. In general, the rate of increased susceptibility to various infections increased among the participants towards the end stage of veganism, between midterm actually and in end stage. We see these curves are pretty broad. It's broad peak. Then almost half of participants experienced increased frequency of colds and flu towards the middle and end stage of veganism. Immunity improved in participants after quitting veganism. Again, as I mentioned, vitamin A plus normal protein synthesis will do the trick, and reversal of anemia. Then also another thing I forgot to mention, cell membranes. The cells, they wither without omega-3s, without sufficient amount of saturated fat, without sufficient amount of choline, with virtually no choline coming with the diet. Cell membranes, what are they going to build from? The body, while it's alive, it regenerates constantly. Some cells die, some cells emerge. What are you going to build them from? Okay, you can recycle the dead cells, but you cannot build a good functional cell out of that. You need new nutrition for that. People who are detoxing, what are you building new cells from? From Holy Spirit. Then, lipid and cholesterol issues. So here, because I don't consider LDL to be necessarily a bad thing, alone it doesn't tell us anything. I didn't include it in the table, unfortunately, because it would be interesting in the retrospect. I'm analyzing. It would be interesting to see if vegans actually had high LDL. But since it's not a condition or particularly like a simple symptom of being unwell, I didn't include it. And now I'm thinking that it was dumb. But I don't have this data. I only put there high triglycerides that are pathological, and low HDL is also being unfavorable. And we see the scale here is 20%. We see that as early vegans, people already started experiencing low HDL. From 0 it went to 8%. then stayed 8%, and then we see the rate doubled, so 17% of people, so 4 people had low HDL as vegans in the end stage. And then this got reversed. High triglycerides were also on the rise, reaching 12% in the end stage of veganism, 12% of participants. These are dangerous and bad things that veganism does, and it's very common on vegan influencers who just don't understand how veganism cooks blood vessels because of elevated homocysteine, because of coenzyme 12B6 methionine lysine deficiencies, because of omega 3 omega 6 imbalance. So it's just like because of also consuming a ton of sugar. So there's blood vessel damage from all sides and inability of repairing it. That's why the body sends when blood vessel membranes, cell membranes are being destroyed, they send signals to send LDL. So LDL will be increasing. Then HDL also, it can be low partially because of amino acid imbalances too. Because HDL is what? It's lipoprotein. It's a protein that carries cholesterol molecule through the blood vessels. It's a protein. It has structure that requires amino acids. It requires all amino acids. So low HDL was observed in 8% of participants in the beginning and end stage of veganism, and 17% of participants towards the end stage of veganism. 12% of participants experienced elevated triglycerides in the end stage of veganism. Kidney stones and gallstones. I have an interview with Char where she was experiencing where she talked about her experience, and this is kidney stone. The data point is from her, for one person. The scale here is 10%, so we're dealing with 2 people, and I actually checked. For this graph, I checked. So I had 2 people who had gallstones before going vegan, then got reversed. And then this is new person who had gallstones as midterm and end stage vegan. So these 2 people, they went vegan and they completely reversed their gallstones and they no longer experienced them. This is a new person with gallstones, midterm and end stage vegan, who also no longer experiences them after quitting veganism. And this is one person with kidney stones in the midterm of veganism. Why this can be? Partially because if you don't purge your gallbladder, can be the case. And at the same time, you eat a high carbohydrate diet, liver can form cholesterol from carbohydrates, from fructose in particular. So liver can produce it, but if you don't eat fat, if you don't purge their bile, and then if you take the composition of your bile changes too, you can start precipitating the stones in the gallbladder, and they just sit there. And well, you put like a seed, right? You put a seed, and the seed just grows from whatever is incident on it. So that's how they form. It can be related to diet that's low fat, for example. Then we're going to behavioral issues again. So aggression and irritability. The scale here is 60%. Here we have aggression, irritability, and anger. Irritability spikes. 50% of people experienced irritability in the end stage of veganism. Our baseline was 17%. Then it goes down here in the early veganism, and then it's on the rise again, like very quickly rises midterm and end stage veganism. Irritability. What is irritability? Let's think about it. Imagine you are at some resort, you slept really well, you are on vacation, you had breakfast, you're like super peaceful and tranquil. Let's say you went shopping, you fulfilled all of your consumer needs. Now you're sitting on the seashore, drinking little espresso with some beautiful dessert. Life is so beautiful. Some child is running, and like bounces into your chair or throws a ball at your table because it's some outdoors cafe. You will probably be like, "Oh, precious child, ha ha ha, how cute." You will make a joke probably and you will be totally tranquil. Now imagine if you experience the same thing when you had a super crazy day that exhausted you, where you were underslept, where you were hangry, and so on and so forth. You probably will explode. Irritability is a sign that there is a very strong exhaustion. Irritability is the symptom of you ignoring your basic needs for an extended period of time, or having compounded things that stem from you ignoring your basic needs. So, this is what irritability is, in a nutshell, usually. So irritability is just lack of resource to cope with the with spontaneity of the external world. This is what it is. Make conclusions by yourself. 50% of participants report their irritability in the end stage of veganism, and not surprising, and given the plethora of data that we saw that could possibly support this. Aggression and anger issues were in 25% of people by the end stage of veganism, and then most of those things reversed after quitting veganism. So half of the participants experienced irritability towards the end stage of veganism, a quarter of the participants developed anger and aggression towards the end stage of veganism, and these symptoms subsided after quitting veganism. In most people, except for one. The next one, difficulty sleeping. This is such a lonely plot after all of other curves. So difficulty sleeping, the scale here is 50%. We see that going vegan helped 12% of participants to no longer experience sleep issues. But then, by midterm veganism, the problem started increasing. So we have 17% of people already had sleeping issues as midterm vegans, and then as end stage vegans, people had like 42% of people reported difficulty sleeping. Why vegan diet can be conducive of difficulty sleeping? First of all, it's going to use bathroom, going to pee 20 times a night. If you have any imbalances with sugar regulation, that will do. Then if you eat a lot of diuretic foods, if you're raw vegan, that will do. Then if you eat a lot of things that irritate the bladder, it's like certain spices, certain foods can do that. That will do. Then vitamin D deficiency will do. Hormonal problems, hormonal imbalances will do. This is only nocturia, basically, when you need to use bathroom all night. Then another thing is that we saw that people suffer from back pain, different location of back pain, and that will do because any pain creates what? It creates tension. Tension creates mental tension. Mental tension creates cortisol. Cortisol prevents you from falling asleep. Then, in general, malnutrition produces also stress hormones. Your body wants to find food and it does not, it won't understand why the F you are not going and looking for food right now. Then, if you have very already disordered eating because you're constantly hungry and malnourished, even though you eat a ton, you're also going to not be able to sleep. Then, also, if you stuff your belly, and we saw that pretty like good fraction of people suffered from eating a lot, overeating because they were in need of nutrition. Their body tried doing its best. It's also quite difficult to sleep, so there are many reasons that can go into this. Almost half of the participants developed difficulty sleeping towards the end stage of veganism. Going vegan helped to resolve difficulty sleeping initially in 12% of participants, and 8% of participants still suffer from sleeping issues after quitting veganism. I hope you guys find ways to do that. I personally, as end stage vegan, I would fall asleep exclusively on the acupressure mat because it helped me to relax my back. Because I struggled to stay stacked during the day, it gave me I had to exert so much effort staying stacked as an end stage vegan. It was really difficult, taxing. So all muscles they try to compensate. Fatigue and sleepiness. Fatigue, we have 100% scale. Look at this. So fatigue and sleepiness. I think we found the answer to the first question that we have in this, that we had in my list in the beginning of the video. So fatigue and sleepiness. We see that 80% of the participants suffered from fatigue by the end stage of veganism. 80%. And 50% suffered from sleepiness in the end stage of veganism. And the rate was gradually on the rise. So from quarter, then 50% in the midterm veganism, then 80%. All of these were reversed by quitting veganism. People no longer feel fatigue or sleepiness, which means that out of 16 hours of the active day life, they get 16 hours of the active day life, as opposed to living at the quarter maximum of their potential. Social attitude here, another social attitude thing. I put here misanthropy, cynicism, loneliness, and loss of humor. Scale here is 30%. So big trend here, the unique curve for our study here. Misanthropy is shifted towards early and midterm veganism as opposed to previously being in the end stage veganism. Our peak is walked to the beginning of veganism. So we see that the surge of misanthropy goes from 0 to 25% as people go vegan. Not surprising because veganism again is anti-human, pro-animal. You hate everyone who eats animals, who abuses animals. That's how it goes. In midterm veganism, we see that it's 30%. And then it goes slowly down, 20% in the mid-end stage veganism. And then misanthropy remains at 4% of people. One person basically still has misanthropy after quitting veganism. And I guess after everything you go through, you might start seeing humanity from different light. So then another thing that we see here is that loneliness. Very sad curve here. So 12% of people, which is 3 people, suffered with loneliness early in veganism, before veganism, and then there is a peak. More people joined in. So this curve became less lonely, I guess. In the end stage of veganism, the rate of loneliness doubled, and then it went back to where it started. Again, maybe go search for friends here in the comments. We have pretty good community here, I guess, of like-minded people. Again, I don't know. Maybe you want to separate yourself from all this vegan situation, which well I will understand if you wouldn't want to seek companionship in this community, but still, good people come by. So before veganism, also we see that nobody had problems with humor. Than in the beginning, or in early veganism, there was one person developed loss of humor, then 2 people in midterm veganism. Then we have peak 25% had loss of humor. And this can be also associated with loss of interest for life, with depression, because when you are depressed, when you see people having fun, being cheerful, and even being satirical or sarcastic, in depression, even those things, they become very annoying. You no longer understand why people would even laugh. It's very crazy. Cynicism, look at this. Cynicism actually came to stay. In a lot of in a lot of people who developed cynicism is in end stage veganism. You see people started being cynical, and then, except for one person, people remain cynical as ex-vegans. So, yeah, cynicism increased and stayed. Kind of unique. Then we're going to see. I don't know what we're going to see. Let's see. Vertigo and fainting. Unexpected, but okay. So fainting, 3 people or 4 people suffered from fainting, 17% of participants before veganism. Then going vegan helped them. Then in the end stage of veganism, there was new couple of people who developed fainting. And then the person who experienced fainting before veganism started fainting again after quitting veganism. So this one defaulted back to pre-veganism. So a person who reversed fainting by going vegan resumed having it as an ex-vegan. This is quite interesting. I'm very curious why it is so. If you know, please write in the comments if you would like to share. So this one person stayed, but 2 or 3 more people, they no longer had it. Then vertigo occurred, developed in midterm and end stage vegans, and then got reversed by quitting veganism. The next plot is breathing issues. The scale here is 30%, and I put here difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, asthma, and excessive mucus in throat. So we see asthma, first of all. We see that going vegan helped one person to relieve their asthma. And then it never resumed, and then as ex-vegans, people no longer have asthma. Here, I dare to speculate that this is dairy, linked to dairy for this one person. And then for other person, I don't know, whatever food sensitivities in terms of plant kingdom you may have, if you quit them, this will do. So dairy and plants are usually the root cause of asthma in people. Once again, biochemistry related. And then we are going to see our peak. So 25% of people developed shortness of breath in the end stage of veganism. We're going to see later what things were correlated with iron deficiency, with iron deficient anemia. So maybe we'll see correlation there with this symptom because the numbers kind of align with iron deficiency. And then difficulty breathing was developed in 12% of people, which is 3 people in the end stage of veganism. Excessive mucus in throat was not experienced before veganism, but now is experienced by 1 person after quitting veganism, and was the highest rate in midterm veganism. So this is another interesting one. But yeah, shortness of breath, we'll surely look at it in the context of iron deficiency later in this presentation. Then allergies and food sensitivities. This is a tricky one because food sensitivity is like, no, if you have food sensitivity, just don't eat what you have food sensitivity to and be merry, right? So you reverse food sensitivities by not eating foods that you're sensitive to. So here the scale is 50%, and we see that going vegan in general helped people who suffered with food sensitivities and allergies to relieve it. I actually received a note from 1 person that they reversed their seasonal allergy, after they quit eating dairy. So dairy is very related to some respiratory things, including allergies, so some hyperactivity. And as early vegans, people saw improvements, but then we see the surge, food sensitivities increase. Over 40% of people reported having food sensitivities in end-stage veganism. And then the rate dropped again to 20%. So 50% of people no longer experience food sensitivities after quitting veganism to whatever foods they have in mind. Allergies, we see that it also goes down, then bounces back, and then goes down as ex-vegans. So going vegan helped participants to no longer experience allergy and food sensitivities, some of them, likely dairy related. And then the surge of allergies and food sensitivities occurred towards the end stage of veganism, 17 and 42% respectively. Quitting veganism helped 20% of participants to no longer experience food sensitivity. So by 50%, this rate dropped. And I have interview with Samir in the ex-vegan interviews. And I actually went on his channel. And I think we also had some interaction in the comments. And he said that he used to be dairy sensitive. And then when he went on a keto diet, animal-based keto diet, he started being able to handle dairy really well. And he's not the only person who had reported that. I also know 1 person in real life who also was, the entire life they thought that they were sensitive to dairy. And now they eat all dairy possible and everything's fine. Except for some like very weird cheeses sometimes. Then dermatological symptoms. This is another huge one. The scale here is 70%. And here on this family of curves are excessive hair loss, dandruff, dermatitis. Before vegan, why is it before vegan? Some glitch. Eczema, dry skin, and psoriasis. So psoriasis, there was 1 person with psoriasis. They had it and have it throughout their entire thing. So we're not going to go back to it. Then we're going to to analyze the peak. Dry skin. Dry skin was observed in 60% of people in the end stage of veganism. So when we talk about dry skin, skin in general is not like the surface is not aqueous. It's coated with a mixture of fatty acids and cholesterol. So cholesterol is eliminated through the pores, and this coating on the skin is lipid based, obviously. It's not watery. Water sits inside of the skin bound to hyaluronic acid. It sits in this matrix. But also, skin on the inside is also protein and fat mixture. Water makes only a fraction of the composition and smaller fraction. So there is no water as water anywhere on the skin and in the skin. There's just a small fraction of it. When we think about dry skin, it's likely deficiency in fatty acids, fats, and even collagen and hyaluronic acid. So this is what it is. And this is not surprising here that people suffered from dry skin. Here, yeah, before going vegan, actually going vegan helped some people to improve this condition, but then it surged. It's a very common thing. 60% of participants reported that. Then the next most popular thing was excessive hair loss. Over 40% of people experienced excessive hair loss in the end stage of veganism. Then the next highest one is dandruff. It was steady from 17% till the midterm veganism, and then in the end stage of veganism, it bumps up to 20%, or 30%, 30%. And then we see eczema is on the rise through the veganism, and then it got completely reversed after quitting veganism in all the participants who experienced it. And then dermatitis. Dermatitis was before veganism, and early veganism increased and then it shrunk. So we see that all of those dermatological issues, almost all of them, are reversed completely by quitting veganism and performing whatever adjustments people performed with their diet. So 60% of participants developed dry skin towards the end stage of veganism. Over 40% of the participants experienced excessive hair loss towards the end stage of veganism. The rate of eczema increased during the middle and end stage of veganism and then got completely reversed, and then skin conditions mostly reversed after quitting veganism. Dermatological symptoms too: jaundice, golden glow, loss of collagen, premature aging, and acne. So, what we see here is that yellow skin happened in 17% of the participants, or 12% of participants in the end stage of veganism. So, these are either bilirubin was very high, which indicates some not so good and kind of anemia and destruction of red blood cells, or again, some deficiencies that cause red blood cells malfunction, or accumulation of beta carotene. I had this yellow thing going like this when I was late vegan. It was pretty ugly. Then we see premature aging and loss of collagen. They overlap here almost entirely. So 50% of people lost collagen and developed premature aging. Why is it so? Let's repeat it 1 millionth time. Homocysteine, elevated homocysteine, and also, of course, supplementary things like mineral imbalances, amino acid imbalances, and such can contribute. But no matter how much of building blocks for building collagen, for promoting the reaction of collagen synthesis, you will supply to your body, how much copper you eat, because vegan diet is really rich in copper. Copper is considered one of the things that's super important for collagen synthesis because it also mediates the reaction of collagen synthesis. No matter how much of that you will eat, you will never be able to exceed the rate of destruction of collagen because of homocysteine, because of glycation as well. So you have actually a compounding factor of glycation of collagen and homocysteine destruction. Collagen in the skin is only part of the picture. It's only the visible symptom. The big picture is that all collagen in the body gets destroyed, including the bones. So this, in 50% of people, was only a cosmetic effect of that. Premature aging. So when you watch the supplement video, you will see that how many people take collagen supplements nowadays after quitting veganism. Fortunately, it got reversed. So if you are right now vegan whose skin on the face feels like cloth, I have video about how vegan skin feels, by the way, and also comparison. I'm showing there as well. During end stage veganism and after quitting veganism, be assured that it's reversible. You will go back to your biochemical optimum probably in 4-6 months, but you will keep seeing the improvements in your skin quality for probably a year past quitting veganism. Just do it, see it, it's fascinating. Then acne, we see that acne was steady and then slight reduction, and the rate of acne happened in midterm veganism, then increased in end stage veganism, reversed by quitting veganism. Again, this is some customization of the diet happened after veganism. Probably people go animal based and they reverse acne because a lot of people are sensitive to carbohydrate intake, and especially excessive carbohydrate intake. I don't like to demonize macros. So, loss of collagen and premature aging developed in half of the participants by the end stage of veganism. Reversal of excessive collagen loss occurred in all participants. 12% of participants developed jaundice towards the end stage of veganism. Participants who had acne prior to going vegan no longer experience it after quitting veganism. Congratulations, guys. Nails, tongue, and mouth lining symptoms. This is an interesting one because you can actually conduct diagnosis of your health, certain deficiencies, some like hidden eczema even, by analyzing your nails, by analyzing your tongue, by also observing how resilient your mouth lining is. If you bite your cheek, and you develop an ulcer, that's pretty bad. I mean, you're just supposed to have normal inflammation that just heals in 2 days. Because mucous membranes, they are naturally fit to repair themselves very quickly because they interface with the outer world. So some degree of damage is expected, some degree of aggressive influence is expected. But it's not supposed to be a super offensive inflammation that affects a person for weeks. It's not supposed to be this way. So all of those things is including the tongue patterns, including tongue changes and nails, can tell a lot, because nails respond to also protein synthesis, because this is protein, minerals. So you can kind of gauge what's happening in your body in general. Well, if you're in surplus of nutrients or if you're in deficit. So, nails, tongue, and mouth. We have nail deformities, nail pitting, geographic tongue, and mouth ulcers. Interestingly, mouth ulcers were on the rise in early vegans. Then they go down in midterm and go up slightly again in the end stage, and then they vanish in the end ex-vegans. Nail deformities affected 30% of people, interestingly. So it's like about 7 people here. Then nail pitting happened in midterm vegans and end stage vegans in 2 people. And geographic tongue developed in the end stage of veganism in 12% of people. Interesting. So geographic tongue, mouth ulcers, they can be related to B12 deficiency. Geographic tongue can also be related to eczema. Mouth ulcers can be related to vitamin A deficiency, vitamin C deficiency. Then nail deformities can be related to anemias. Nail pitting is a symptom of eczema typically. Even before eczema happens, like erupts on the skin. So nail deformities developed in 30% of participants towards the end stage of veganism. Nail pitting developed in 8% of participants in the middle and end stage of veganism. The number of participants experiencing mouth ulcers doubled shortly after becoming vegan. So this is likely B12 deficiency here. Because B12 deficiency happens rapidly. Vitamin A deficiency is slower. Nail deformities can be change of shape, change of structure, change of flexibility or strength. Nails can become brittle. They can start splitting into layers. So different things can happen. They can develop ridges too, like ridges, vertical, horizontal, whatever. There are tables for that, for some self-diagnosis, but then loss of pigment. There are some healers who talk about how eyes that are brown are toxic and blue are not toxic. But in reality, brown eyes are just iris covered in protein with pigment. So this is not. This is how they like to bring it up, is like it's basically poop in front of your iris. That's how they depict it usually, but it's far from truth. So loss of pigment, we have hair pigment and iris pigment. So there are certain things that can happen. Hair pigment fading and iris pigment fading. It's not natural graying of the hair sometimes. When you are methionine deficient for a long time, or when you have, it's likely related to methionine deficiency actually, you can have buildup of hydrogen peroxide at your hair follicles, which will be bleaching your hair. It will not be gray, like when it's completely rid of copper, all of those brown hues. It's just bleached slightly, so it's faded. So here we have the scale of 20%, we have 17% of participants who experienced hair pigment fading in the end stage of veganism that got reversed for most of the people. Iris pigment fading happened in one person and then also got reversed. Interesting, right? Because there are a lot of people who brag online that their iris changed its color after a long term of veganism, along with period loss, and it's all such a fascinating detox. Then changes in facial structures, features, and other things. So these can be both due to structural changes, loss of collagen, or they can be due to neurological damage too. So the scale here is 20%, so there will be pretty few cases, but we have change of nose shape, change of eye shape, mouth breathing, lazy eye, and acquired face asymmetry. So, lazy eye and acquired face asymmetry can be neurological or they can be also collagen related. For example, I had very strong offset during veganism between my sides of the face in terms of the collagen content in the skin. Change of nose shape also, it's cartilage. Then, I mean, just extrapolate. Change of eye shape can happen optically because of the change of the tissues around it. The eye socket can get desorbed, the bone itself. The fat pockets can also get begone, and that will also optically change the shape of the eye. Mouth breathing is can be due to, I don't know, I guess persistent nose clogging. Let's see. So the peak here, the most popular things were acquired face asymmetry and change of nose shape. Face asymmetry did not reverse in one person. It was 4 people total, so 3 people reversed it, one didn't. So we have 3-to-1 reversal ratio. Then change of eye shape happened to 3 people, 12%. And then change of nose shape reversed. Then mouth breathing was common, actually more common among vegans than non-vegans. So 12%, 3 people developed mouth breathing, and then it got reversed, and they never experienced it before veganism. And then change of eye shape, yeah, we already discussed. And then lazy eye happened to 3 people, and for one person it did not reverse. Or no, wait, 2 people. So 2 people experienced lazy eye as mid-term and end-stage vegans, and for one person it was not reversed. So this is changes in facial features. Then see the cardiovascular disease, tumors, blood vessel damage. We have here tumors, cardiovascular disease, thrombosis, atherosclerosis, and stroke. I think no vegan, no young vegan will go and do coronography to see the status of their blood vessels, but it's unfortunately not the general practice, but it should be because, again, we discussed it before. Veganism is incredibly damaging for the blood vessels. It's super dangerous. Super dangerous practice for blood vessels, starting from collagen loss to all conditions for turning cholesterol into harmful substances to actually calcium supplements, omega-3, omega-6 imbalances to I don't know, to a lot of stuff. We discussed it multiple times. So what we see here is that no people were diagnosed with anything but tumors. So one person developed tumors and reversed them, which is nice. Then heart symptoms. Even though there was no cardiovascular disease diagnosis, there are heart symptoms. And the scale here is 60%. And 50% of people developed heart palpitations as end stage vegans. 17% of people had chest pain as end stage vegans. Recurring ER visits also before veganism, then throughout veganism, and ex veganism. Unfortunately, we have 10% of people or 8% of people, so 2 people, from 2 to 3 people experience recurring ER visits. Then heart palpitations is the elephant in the room here. 50% of people had it in the end stage of veganism. And then you had the task to determine the correlation between heart palpitations and iron deficiency. And then chest pain, it was non-zero before going vegan, then it slowed down, and then it resumed in the end stage veganism, and then got reduced in the ex-veganism. So think about heart healthy diet. Blood pressure and headaches. 40% is the scale. Frequent headaches were observed in the end stage veganism. They were like surging in the end stage veganism among the participants. Again, we'll be looking at this in relation with iron deficiency. Then we see that the next peak here is migraines. Migraines peaked here in the end stage veganism as well. We see slight reduction in the rate of migraines because of switching to veganism, but then it peaks. Complete reversal in the ex-vegans, which is amazing. Then with frequent headaches, there's also almost complete reversal after quitting veganism. Then low blood pressure. We see that it was the highest rate was prior to going vegan. Then it reduced the rate of low blood pressure after going vegan. So among vegans, it was less so, and then it got even lower rate after quitting veganism. And then high blood pressure, nobody had, and nobody has. So a third of participants developed frequent headaches by the end stage of veganism. Going vegan helped one person to reduce the incidence of migraines, but the rate of migraines among the participants was the highest by the end stage of veganism. Again, small fluctuations here, but this trend with headaches is pretty important and it's easy to explain, in fact. Then muscle and fitness related issues. 30% scale here. We have muscle tension, muscle stiffness, frequent sprains, frequent fitness injuries, difficulty recovering. Difficulty recovering was the peak symptom in the end stage of veganism that was not heard of before veganism and early stage veganism. So it started rising in the midterm veganism and then peaked in the end stage veganism, affecting 30% of participants. Got completely reversed after quitting veganism, so people no longer struggle with recovery. Then the next peak is muscle stiffness. Was also peaking at 25% of participants. Quarter of participants experienced muscle stiffness in the end stage of veganism. Unfortunately, it persisted for half of those people. So 12% of people still experienced after quitting. Then muscle tension is the next peak here, sharing with frequent fitness injuries and midterm veganism. So frequent fitness injuries in 17% of people and muscle tension here. Frequent fitness injuries got reversed. Here, people probably stopped exercising actually in the end stage veganism. That's why it was not as high as in midterm veganism. I started having injuries in the midterm veganism and then through end stage veganism because I wanted to work out because working out was relieving the discomfort that I had from collapsing of the bones basically. So I kept working out and I kept getting injuries through that end stage veganism. Here, people probably were wiser and they stopped working out. But not working out would be too uncomfortable for me, so I couldn't do that. So this is my hypothesis. Maybe they just literally hacked something and no longer had injuries. And frequent sprains also, the rate increased slightly. We see that with muscle tension, only one person suffers with muscle tension after quitting veganism. So difficulty recovering after fitness injuries, muscle stiffness became more commonplace towards the end stage of veganism. The fitness and mobility associated injuries and negative symptoms mostly resolved after quitting veganism, but again we see that muscle stiffness still persists, muscle tension still persists for some people, for a few people. Now we're going to joint and mobility issues and we have only one more graph left and we're going to see the custom entry, something that people entered themselves. We'll have three slides on that. Three, not four, three. So joint and mobility issues. 40% scale here. We see that joint pain, joint discomfort affected 38% of people, participants here. Hypermobility increased in the end stage of veganism. Then rigidity also increased in the end stage of veganism. The reversal was incomplete. So among the participants, there is still up to 12% of people suffer from those things. So joint discomfort was quite common. More than a third of participants experienced joint discomfort and pain during the end stage of veganism. Again, no diagnosis, just a symptom. We had osteoarthritis, but we also have other things. Joint pain and discomfort, they can come from buildup of like let's say from calcification or from wear and tear. That is increased because of excessive collagen breakdown. Then 12% of participants experienced rigidity during the end stage of veganism. Joint symptoms were largely resolved after quitting veganism, but again, not for everyone. And then hip pain and injuries. This is a serious one. So we see the scale here is 30%. We see hip pain. Almost a third of participants experienced hip pain in the end stage of veganism. Again, this complex is very weight bearing. The body is not capable of bearing the weight when it's weakened. When when you have this useless mass and loss of structural support. So the body weight itself becomes burdensome for the body. This is what I want you to understand, that veganism makes the mere body weight, burdensome. Then other things that can contribute to hip pain can be something autoimmunity related. Thyroid issues can affect how the joints feel. Then fatty acid imbalances can be inflammatory, can cause inflammation, flare ups in the joints. Oxalates can cause that as well. But oxalate stones, they require certain specific conditions to form like those sharp crystals. So it may not be the case for vegans specifically, but some people actually build it up. Then high carbohydrate diets can also cause uric acid metabolism problems, which will actually, that will contribute to building oxalate crystals. Uric acid creates perfect conditions for growing sharp oxalate crystals. They go hand in hand. I have it in my oxalate video that I made as raw vegan. Still, everything that I said there holds true. So, hip pain and injuries. Hip pain, third people, then frequent injuries affected 17% of people, then tendon ligament tearing affected 12% of people in the end stage of veganism, and then frequent injuries reversed after quitting veganism. Hip pain almost reversed for almost everyone after quitting veganism, and tendon ligament tearing, same story here. So it was on the rise in the midterm and end stage veganism, and then got reversed. And now let's go see the custom entries. So I copied them as people entered them. Before vegan, early, midterm, end stage, and ex-vegan. Let's begin. So sense of smell got worse, midterm and end stage vegan. Periods started coming twice a month, very painful, heavy, and debilitating. Night terrors were not resolved as ex-vegans. Orthorexia. I think that if we, so you see, if I have a very good model for that, orthorexia. If we, as good scientists, we need to first build the framework of conditions of applicability of certain term. If we assume that everything in an average modern supermarket in the developed country, or any country virtually at this point, if any supermarket of food caters food, if we consider that everything in the supermarket is food, then being orthorexic is 100% normal, because it's normal to abstain from a lot of packaged foods, a lot of ultra processed foods. They are not, virtually, they're not food for our body. They can be a treat, occasional thing, but as a part of the daily dietary regimen, they are not food. And hence, if we define orthorexia as being selective in terms of food choices, then it's inevitable that the person who seeks the basic level of health without any like super refinements will be orthorexic just on the basis that we assume that everything in the grocery store is food. If we assume that, let's say, like whole foods, fresh produce, fresh meats, fresh dairy are food, and nothing else is food, then being super selective in this realm may be orthorexic. Okay, but given how much processed food is sold in the stores labeled as food, orthorexia becomes suddenly very normal. So this is a very flexible definition here. Then midterm and end stage vegan, severe intestinal pain. Then loss of night vision, possibly due to vitamin A deficiency. Loss of motivation. Unknown pain, tingles, prickling sensation that couldn't be diagnosed occurred after COVID infection, cleared after quitting veganism. Interesting. Frequent sunburns up until quitting veganism and adjusting the diet. Next table. Debilitating food cravings in the end stage of veganism. Multiple sclerosis became aggressive. Midterm and end stage veganism. Please watch the interview with Ellie on my channel. PMDD. Please decipher in the comments. Reactive hypoglycemia. End stage veganism is when it developed and then persisted through ex-veganism. Then POTS, tachycardia, racing heart. Feeling cold more easily. Nerve pain. Jorgen's syndrome. Also, need to Google that. Eye sensitivity to the sun throughout the entire veganism and then reversed after quitting. Then the next table. Actually, I have 4 tables. My fingers didn't lie. Rhinitis, which is, I guess, runny nose. Then dermatographic urticaria. Dermatographic urticaria. Fingers getting very cold in a cool environment, numbness in fingers. Restlessness, nightmares. Chronic UTI. Stomach pain after acidic foods up until quitting veganism. Slow wound healing scarring in the end stage veganism, then eyesight deteriorated midterm end stage vegan, then recovery happened in the ex veganism. Then, throughout the entire veganism, weak and brittle nails, reversed after quitting veganism. Then, the last one, before veganism and after quitting veganism, the person reported that they had cervical mucus during ovulation, so they tracked their cycle, and this is a positive thing. That's why I still like highlight it in green because this is the symptom that disappeared during veganism. There was no longer a symptom of ovulation, which could signal that I don't know if the person tracked their ovulation with the test, but it could be a symptom of not ovulating or not ovulating regularly. Then or I know it can be even there could be a cycle, but it could be an ovulatory cycle. That's how it goes. Then pinched nerves in the end stage of veganism. I'm with you with pinched nerves. Then skin looks pale and sick. And with yellow triangle. So these are custom entries, and now we're going to see the summary of this data, and we're going to see the relationships. So the first plot that I'm going to show you is at the end stage of veganism. What were the most prevalent conditions and symptoms from what we've seen so far? And here they go in the descending order. Please use the numbers as the guides. We start with 80%. So the first one, the leading one, is fatigue, then flatulence, then short-term memory issues, then depression, then period pain, loss of collagen, heart palpitations, sleepiness, irritability, caries, difficulty formulating phrases, excessive hair loss, food sensitivities, gum inflammation, tooth sensitivity, frequent colds and flu, difficulty sleeping, loss of libido, joint discomfort, joint pain, difficulty speaking in third of the participants. So we start with 80% and end at 30% here. So let's recap here. So 80% of people suffered from fatigue. Then 67% of participants had flatulence and short-term memory issues. Then 63% of participants had depression. It's all in the end stage of veganism. Then around 50% people had period pain, loss of collagen, heart palpitations, sleepiness, irritability. Then 46% of people reported caries and difficulty formulating phrases. Then 42% of people reported excessive hair loss, food sensitivities, gum inflammation, tooth sensitivity, frequent colds and flu, difficulty sleeping, and loss of libido. And then 38% of people reported joint discomfort and joint pain, and third of the people reported difficulty speaking at the end stage of veganism. And in the next plot, we're going to see the same scale. I plotted with the same scale for visual effect. What of this got reversed and with which rate? So how many people still experience those things after quitting veganism? Let's see. After quitting veganism, we see that no one experiences fatigue. The highest thing is food sensitivities. The next highest is period pain among 14.4% of people. The next highest is joint discomfort, and joint pain persists in 12.5% of people, or 3 people. The next highest is short-term memory issues, 8% will be the next highest. Short-term memory issues, depression, heart palpitations, difficulty formulating phrases, difficulty sleeping, loss of libido. And I mentioned neurological damage is one of the toughest. It's one of the most dangerous consequences of veganism that can be long-lasting or irreversible. The next highest is at 4%, so one person still experiences flatulence, irritability, caries, gum inflammation, tooth sensitivity. It's not one person experience all of these. It's just one person per each. And difficulty speaking. And then no one experiences fatigue, loss of collagen, sleepiness, excessive hair loss, or frequent colds and flu. From this, in the end stage of veganism, we go to this, after quitting veganism. If you're still vegan, you're scared to quit, look at this plot, look at this plot, Look at this plot again. Look at this plot again. Keep looking at these two plots until they ring. Then the next thing we're going to see, it will be analytical plot. We're going to see B12 supplementation and how it was related to the symptoms. So this data illustrates what percent of participants who supplemented and did not supplement with B12 developed a symptom. So I separated this into two groups, people who supplemented B12 and people who did not supplement B12. And we know the rate of this from the previous video on supplementation status. There was a fraction of people who did not supplement with B12. It was a pretty appreciable fraction. So green people supplemented with B12 and purple people did not supplement with B12. And here we have symptoms that could be associated with B12 deficiency. Let's see. Percent of participants here, and on the x-axis we have heart palpitations, joint pain, achy bones, frequent colds and flu, low HDL, vertigo, short-term memory issues, difficulty speaking, fatigue, geographic tongue, frequent injuries. We see that among people who supplemented B12, we had higher rate of fatigue than among people who did not supplement B12. We see that heart palpitations occurred at twice as higher rate among people who supplemented with B12 compared to people who did not supplement with B12. Joint pain, however, was twice as frequent among people who did not supplement B12 compared to people who supplemented with B12. So B12 failure to supplement with B12 affected joint health primarily here. Then another thing where failure to supplement with B12 played a role is difficulty speaking. This is a really important piece of data. So B12 supplementation reduced the relative rate of occurrence of difficulty speaking here. Then frequent injuries also were linked more with failure to supplement with B12. Geographic tongue, in people who it occurred in, we see that there were more people who did not supplement B12 here. Then achy bones were split 50-50. So supplementation with B12 or not supplementation with B12 did not affect the rate of occurrence of achy bones. Low HDL, there was no interesting trend here. Frequent cold and flu were more popular among people who supplemented B12. Then short-term memory issues here. We see that difficulty speaking was more frequent among people who did not supplement B12, but short-term memory issues affected more people in the group of who supplemented B12, relative number of people. I put here the note that percent participants who had the symptoms conditions was calculated relatively to the total number of participants who supplemented B12 and who did not supplement B12. So this is how it was. I took the number of people who supplement B12 and saw how many of those had the symptom, and I took the number of people who did not supplement B12 and saw how many of them relatively had the symptom. This is how this data was calculated. So this kind of doesn't make sense here, right? But we see that the rate of people with short-term memory issues and difficulty speaking was the same among people who did not supplement B12, which tells me that there must be a correlation between B12 deficiency here due to failure to supplement B12. But again, we see that the rate of people with short-term memory issues among people who did supplement with B12 was higher. So was fatigue, so was frequent cold and flu, so were heart palpitations. Joint pain, yes, achy bones was equal rate. Vertigo was among people who supplemented with B12 only. Geographic tongue was slightly higher among people who did not supplement with B12, and frequent injuries were higher among people who did not supplement with B12. But is it conclusive that failure to supplement B12 provided these outcomes with higher frequency? No. There's no strong correlation. If we saw that, let's say, heart palpitations, achy bones were definitely higher, that B12 did help them, then it would be conclusive. This plot, though, it reinforces the importance of taking B12. Does it prove that vitamin B12 as a supplement work? No, it doesn't. We still see very high rates of everything else, relative rates. B12 supplementation is not going to do the trick. It does not. The typical things associated with B12 deficiency will still emerge even if you take B12, because B12 metabolism relies on receiving it as the part of complete nutrition. You cannot just take a pill and fail to supply enough B6, choline, methionine, and lysine and hope that you will process it properly. It's a chemical reaction of turning it into bioavailable vitamin B12 into usable B12. That's why you're super dosing with it when you're taking it with pill. It's not the solution. Yes, it can improve your chances at retaining your wellness, maybe neurological health at some level. But on the long run, it may not work. This is end-stage veganism, by the way. Now let's look at similar plot for iron-deficient people. So this data illustrates what percent of participants who were diagnosed with iron deficiency developed a symptom, and what percent of participants who were not diagnosed with iron deficiency developed a symptom. So red here will be people with diagnosed iron deficiency, and green will be people without diagnosed iron deficiency. And also refer to the previous video to see the rate of people who were diagnosed with iron deficiency in the end stage of veganism. Again, percent participants who had the symptoms conditions was calculated relatively to the total number of participants who were diagnosed with iron deficiency and who were not diagnosed with iron deficiency. So these are relative rates for each bar, calculated relatively to the number of people who were or were not diagnosed with iron deficiency. Hope this is clear. So we're trying to establish if there is a strong correlation between having a symptom and having an iron deficient anemia. Iron deficiency, iron deficient anemia. Let's see. Heart palpitations, joint pain, achy bones, frequent colds and flu, short-term memory issues, difficulty speaking, fatigue, geographic tongue, frequent injuries, and frequent headaches. Compared to just like qualitatively glance in this plot, we see that it's much less ambiguous than this plot. We see that heart palpitations are 3 times as higher in people with diagnosed iron deficiency than in people without diagnosed iron deficiency. Joint pain is split 50-50. So the rate is the same. Then achy bones occurred also with 2.5 times higher frequency in people with diagnosed iron deficiency compared to people without diagnosed iron deficiency. Frequent colds and flu were more frequent in people with diagnosed iron deficiency than people without iron deficiency. Short-term memory issues were, 50% higher in people with diagnosed iron deficiency. Difficulty speaking was more prevalent in people without diagnosed iron deficiency, which tells me that this B12 deficiency indeed, failure to supplement, did neurological damage. Then, fatigue occurred also more in people with diagnosed iron deficiency. 100% of people, in fact, who had diagnosed iron deficiency suffered from fatigue. Then, geographic tongue occurred more in people with diagnosed iron deficiency. Then, frequent injuries occurred more in people without diagnosed iron deficiency. Again, perhaps this is related to B12. Frequent headaches occurred 3 times as higher in people with diagnosed iron deficiency than without diagnosed iron deficiency, and this affected 60% of people with diagnosed iron deficiency. So 60% of everyone who had diagnosed iron deficiency had frequent headaches. So iron deficiency did affect a lot of things, and heart palpitations occurred in 80-something% of people with iron deficiency. That's a strong relationship. So here, again, we need to analyze those plots together for anemia. So we see that the link between heart palpitations and deficiencies was more linked to iron deficiency than it was to B12 deficiency, clearly. Short-term memory issues, let's compare them again. occurred more in people with diagnosed iron deficiency and in people who supplemented B12 than in people who did not supplement B12 and did not have iron deficiency. So these two data plots can be analyzed together, but one important thing that I would like to see that we will not probably be studying extensively in the next maybe couple of the years is choline. Choline deficiency is a super important puzzle here. Choline and methionine. These must become routine blood works for vegans. Mandatory, along with B12 and iron and anemia scanning. We cannot analyze those data without studying all the contributing factors. And suddenly, we approached the end of this presentation. And surprise, surprise, we're not going to talk about the outreach in the next one. We're going to move on to the exact food lists and wellness procedures next. So we'll see you then, because that one will be another mind-blowing, perhaps, piece of information that we'll harvest from this fantastic ex-vegan study. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like this video, and I will see you next time.